Trucker Dave here, and today we're going to show you how to buy a used car. I know you've all heard all the hype about, check the oil, check this, check that. We're not going to go over all of that. I'm going to show you how to find all the hidden little things to look for when looking for a used car. That way you can negotiate the best price and the best deal for the car that you want. So let's get going. Alright, so the first thing you do is you look at the engine. Now, good thing, this engine's filthy. You kind of want that because now you know it hasn't been pressure cleaned. Nobody's hiding anything from you here, and you can look around and see that while the engine's dirty, there's no visible leaks. So that's a good thing. We're not going to spend too much time on the engine. This is just a V6. It's had some aftermarket stuff. It's got a tune. It is a Steeda, which we'll go over here in a minute. But everything looks good. The belts look good. I know the oil hasn't been changed in it, so it's still pretty dark, and and the airbox and all that. I don't worry too much about stuff like this. Check the oil just because you want to make sure it's not sparkly. Yeah, we'll have to look at that in a bit. Expect to change out an airbox filter and do your own oil change and all that when you get the car home. Just because they say it's been done doesn't mean that you don't need to do it. That way you'll know it's been done. So let's go look at the next thing. We're not going to spend too much time on the engine and all that because you've heard it all before. It's all cliche. It's all in every YouTube video and all that of what to look for in the engine and all that. So we're going to forego this, and I'm going to show you some of the other things to look for when buying a used car. So let's get to that. One thing you should always look at is the tires. The first thing, if you have 4 mismatched tires, that's going to tell me that somebody was cheap and didn't bother replacing them in a pair or buying a whole set. 4 mismatched tires means that the front end's probably shot and they're just basement bargaining the car till they can pawn it off on someone else. So be very leery of that. On the other hand, if you see a car that has 2 brand new tires on the front end, and I mean they're still just brand new but the backs are worn, that tells me that they're probably hiding something also. So that's something else to be aware of when you go to drive the car. So that's something to watch out for. When you're sitting here, look at the brake rotors real quick. There's not hardly a groove here. These will probably have to be resurfaced eventually, but the brakes are still in really good shape. There's not any real grooving or pitting, and that's something to look for. So let's go on to the next thing. The paint itself is in pretty good shape. This car has been sitting outside for a while, so yeah, but there's no real big dents on it. There's no there's nothing wrinkled or anything like that. It's just the paint. The clear coating probably needs to be fixed up in a few spots, and that right there is a good negotiating tool too. We had a little bit of right here, and some of the graphics on the Steeda are coming loose on the other side, but they still look pretty good for the most part. And for the most part, the car itself is in really good shape. So let's look at some other stuff now. Now, as we fire the car off, there's no visible warning lights. The car's got 118,000 miles on it. It's a 2005, and so got the seatbelt light and the door ajar, and everything else is off. The tach works, speedometer works, everything works. Now this is a 5-speed, so when you go out and test drive it, you're going to want to make sure the clutch is still in good shape. The clutch feels really good here for the most part. And, don't worry too much about things like the radio and whatnot. They're good points to negotiate a price, but they're not anything that's really all that serious. So, got a nice 5-speed here, and the car's idling really well. and we'll give it a little gas here. And oh yeah. So let's dive a little more in. When you take this car out for a test drive, make sure it shifts smoothly into all the gears. If it's a stick, if it's an automatic, also make sure, because if it hits rough or it shakes, especially an automatic, if it shakes going into a gear, it shakes going into reverse, your transmission's shot. Don't let them tell you that it just does that, because they don't. If they're shaking going into gears, there's something wrong. This being a stick, if you're driving it and it wants to pop out of gear, that tells me that the transmission's worn out, it's been hot dogged, or one of the gears has slipped, and it's going to need a replacement or a rebuild here soon. So be very mindful about how it shifts. If it shifts into all the gears smoothly and reverse, and it doesn't shake, it doesn't shimmy, and it doesn't pop out of gear, you're good to go. But once you buy the car, it may not be a bad idea to have it serviced. Just change out the fluid, check it out, and it's all good. Now, this being a Steeda edition, which we'll go over in a minute, is a Ford authorized program, much like a Shelby or a Roush. It's not quite as popular, but they do build some really cool cars. But we'll go over that here in a minute. So, this being a modified car, there's some other things you need to check. You know, this being a 6, check out the tailpipe. There's nothing in here. This is spotless. So, we got no oil leaks, nothing in the tailpipe, and that's a good thing. So, let's go off and check something else now. This being a Steeda edition Mustang, that's going to factor heavily into the price. The 2005, that's not a Steeda. If this was just a base model V6 Mustang, we'd be looking at maybe $2,500. A Steeda edition, this is actually a one-off car built by Hildebrand Racing. This is actually a lot more. So that's going to factor heavily into the price. But this having as many miles as it on, with a little bit of the cosmetic screwy, that can factor heavily into the decision-making process. Now, if you want some questions answered, you need to get online, and I'll show you what to check out. You need to do your homework when it comes to these cars. Any used car, you need to do your homework. I'll tell you, always get a Carfax, and that's always a very important thing to do. And always do your homework. If you're going to buy a car and spend the money, and you're going to spend a little extra money for a Steeda, you need to do your homework. You need to get online, and you need to have all the proper numbers in order. That way you can negotiate properly. If this is a true Steeda, the first thing it's going to have is this data plate by Steeda with a number, and it will correspond with your VIN number. So that's an important thing to know. That way when you call up Steeda and verify that this is real, you'll get your question answered very quickly. So that's always important. The other thing that's really important in the bargaining process is to know the car's history. Now, if it has this sticker here in the state of Kansas, this is a rebuilt salvage vehicle. This car was wrecked with 1,000 miles on it. Insurance cashed it out. It just had a dented up front bumper and whatnot. It really wasn't trash, but the fact it has a salvage title means that if this was just a base model Mustang, this would be worth about $1,000 because it's got a salvage title. People don't want that. But being as it's a Steeda, it does make it worth a little more. This is not always a bad thing, but it's something to be mindful of, and that's why you get a Carfax and do your research on the car. Now, if the car is only going to be $1,000, don't waste your money on a Carfax. You bought a car for $1,000. Don't expect it to be a gem. But if you're buying a car like this as an investment, that's something to be mindful of, because the amount of money you put into it, you may not get it out. So you just need to watch what you're doing, be mindful, and do your homework on things such as this. Now, this car actually has a really fine lineage. It's actually very fast for a V6. But the seats have been changed out. These are actually out of another Mustang. The owner wanted leather, so they changed them out and put leather, but the stock seats are still in good shape. Which, if you go to buy this car, they offer the original seats, that's a plus. So that's something to look at. But since the driver's seat's a little worn and all that, that's something else you can use to negotiate, you know. But overall, the car's in actually really good shape. Maintenance history is important depending on how much you're spending for a car, what the purpose of the car is, and what you're going to do with the car. If this is a collector car like this car, maintenance history is rather important. If you're spending $1,000 on a base model Mustang, it's not. You're going to spend $1,000 and then you're probably going to spend $1,000 fixing it. That's just the way it works. I bought 70, 80, 90 cars, and that's the way it always works. But make sure you have a good maintenance history, and then if there's not a good maintenance history, be sure to start one of your own. Start with the regular tune-ups, oil changes, changing your filters, and watch your tires and all that. There's also, you need to watch out for if the car's been maintained or not. There's a difference between being maintained and being just driven. You can tell if the car's overly clean, chances are they're trying to hide something. If the car's completely filthy, they don't care. So you really have to be very discerning when you look at these cars and have a very good idea of what you want, what you're looking for, and what you have in mind. Don't settle for anything less than you're willing to pay for, because once you paid cash for that car, it's yours, and it's over. It's yours. You bought it. So be very discerning. If your instincts tell you it's a bad car, walk away. Chances are your instincts are probably right, you know. So be very mindful about what the car looks like in this appearance. Like we saw the engine. The engine was dirty, but it wasn't leaking. It wasn't dirty. It was just dirty kind of out of neglect, not out of, you know, trying to hide anything. So that's kind of what we're looking for. Just neglectful dirtiness to a point's not a bad thing. Now, if the car's just trashed, that's something else. You can tell if a car was trashed and clean. Just look in the nooks and crannies. If there's crap built up in it and it's recent crap, or you pulled a little bit of the carpet back and it's just completely wet, that means they hosed it out 10 minutes before you got there. So just be mindful of what you're looking at. Have a good idea, and if you're unsure, take a friend with you who knows what to look for, because that's your money that you're spending, and like I said, once you bought it, it's yours and you're stuck with it. There's also one more thing that you need to do when you're going to look for a used car. Use caution. If you're buying a car and you're meeting somebody someplace random, take a friend. Be very careful about who you deal with, because you don't know these people. Don't go to their homes. Have them meet you at someplace public, and do not have them come to your house either. It's sad that we have to be this way, but that's just the world we live in now. So try not to do this by yourself, and it's just male or female. This isn't one of those gender things. This is just self-preservation. Just be very careful about who you deal with. If the deal's too good to be true, it probably is. Always take a friend, and don't be afraid to walk away. If they're not going to meet what you want, there's more of these cars out here. And there's a whole lot of these cars in better shape than this for less. They may not be Steedas. If you're stuck on a Steeda, you're going to be kind of at the mercy of whoever owns this car. So, but if you just want a Mustang, there's a lot of them out there. So I appreciate it. I hope this was informative. Please like, share, and subscribe, and we'll catch you later.